Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings as we do have a wind warning issued for parts of northern Scotland this evening, overnight into tomorrow, as we can see quite blustery conditions move through tonight with some heavy and potentially wintry showers as well, but nothing too crazy for the time of year. We'll then have a look at the UKV. We'll go through the precipitation, temperature and the wind gusts through the next 5 days, with it staying fairly unsettled further northwards, but drier and more settled further southwards. Some areas of periodic cloud and rain, but again, nothing particularly out of the ordinary. It is going to be generally average, potentially above average over the course of the next 5 days. Sometimes it could be especially in the north below average with cooler air masses, but not expecting anything deviating too much from average. But as we head into the longer range, something we have been alluding to over the past week or so is the possibility of a Scandinavian high and potentially cold easterly winds. Now, over the last few videos, we have sort of forgotten almost about that scenario as it had diminished from the model output. However, it's pretty much the model run straight after the video recorded yesterday. The models have suddenly now gone back to more of a Scandinavian high sort of pattern. All three models yesterday, as we recorded the video, were going for more of a westerly flow, toppling that high pressure, with very little signs of that higher pressure building towards Scandinavia and pulling in easterly winds. However, today, all of the operational runs are developing some sort of Scandinavian high and some sort of easterly winds between day 7 and day 10, and quite a big chunk of the ensembles now are pulling in cool continental air, and some are even pulling in some bitterly cold air. And there are a few colder runs that are pulling in more of a beast from the east scenario, which I think is unlikely, but we are still seeing it in some of the ensemble runs. So definitely a big flip from yesterday, but I have said it is very volatile and these things can change very quickly. And this is just an example where things have changed quite quickly. Having backed off from the idea over the last few days, the models are now back on board with cold conditions and higher pressure up towards Scandinavia in around 7 to 10 days time, maybe sooner from some of the runs. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So if we do start on the live radar, you can see the north-south split at the moment, with it unsettled and colder in the north and drier and milder further southwards. Now we've got a lot of sunshine around in many of these areas to the south of this instability in these showers, but there will be some cloud around as well, and temperatures are average to above average for the time of year, with some areas even getting towards sort of 10 to 12 degrees through central southern areas. However, for the further northwards, around the high pressure, we're getting quite a deep low developing well to north of Scotland, but its tight isobars are developing a lot of blustery showers, and with that tight isobars as well, we're seeing very strong winds, and that's why we got this yellow warning issued for later on this evening. And of course, dragging in cold air from southern Greenland, there is snow over moderate to high ground off Scotland. Again, not to low-lying areas at the moment. Could have some wintry mixed to low-lying areas, but definitely a few hundred metres above sea level we'll be seeing these wintry showers, and they will fall quite heavy, and tonight with the stronger winds could be blizzard conditions around. Again though, must emphasise it's mainly over the higher ground, but that freezing level could lower at times depending on the time of day, and of course evaporative cooling, which will come into sort of the pattern towards this evening. But yeah, you can see the big north-south split, and this is going to continue over the coming days. Now, if you put on the temperatures, as around 1:30 as I'm recording this, you can see it is cooler further northwards, milder further southwards. You can see towards the south and southeast, we're seeing a lot more yellows developing today. Temperatures in and around that sort of 10 to 12 degree mark. Further northwards through especially northern England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, more blues mixing in, and over the higher ground of Scotland, lighter blues mixing in, temperatures down towards the low single digits. And again, this is the pattern we'll be seeing over the next 5 days, with a big temperature contrast through the country. If we do look at the weather warnings, you can see we have a wind warning. It has slightly changed from yesterday. The southern extent of the warning has been cut off, and it now really only controls northern parts of Scotland from 8 p.m. tonight until 10 a.m. tomorrow. Strong winds expected to bring some disruption to parts, and again the warning area has been reduced a little, such that the focus is across northern Scotland. Again, high likelihood, lower end of the impact. It was higher end of the impact, lower end of the likelihood, and that's because we were thinking maybe 80 mph wind gusts were possible, but we had low certainty of that. We've got more certainty on the wind gusts, but they are lower, so around 60 or 70 miles per hour. So you can see here 60 miles per hour widely, and perhaps 70 to 80 miles per hour for a time. So those isolated, very strong, gusty winds. So if we do go over to the UKV now and have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the course of the next 5 days, you can see through this afternoon those wintry showers and blustery conditions in the north, much drier with clearer skies further southwards. Through this evening, you can see that continued unsettled weather further northwards, and it sort of gets cut off as soon as you get into sort of northern England, where it starts to go clearer skies and drier. But yeah, it could be blustery showers, wintry showers through Scotland overnight tonight, and then as we head into tomorrow afternoon, eventually that instability does move southwards, maybe giving a few showers through Northern Ireland, Northern England, and maybe elsewhere, but generally petering out and turning just into a larger area of cloud. So to start February, it is looking quite cloudy and probably quite dull out there tomorrow. As we head into Thursday morning, you can see a weather front arrives into Scotland again, mainly only for northern areas, but could extend into parts of Wales and into parts of northwest England as well, and it just generally is quite unsettled further northwards. But again, stark contrast between parts of Scotland and southern England. Through into Thursday, we still remain very cloudy and generally quite dull. Still rain pushing into western Scotland and maybe some patches of drizzle elsewhere, but again, nothing too crazy. And then through Thursday into Friday, again, showers further northwards, and in the south, it will be likely again cloudy, maybe some patches of drizzle, and maybe some clear skies breaking out through parts of southern Republic of Ireland, parts of Wales, and southwest England. And as we head into Saturday, another weather front spreads into the north and actually does make its way further southwards, but eventually does peter out. And then into Saturday afternoon, into Sunday, you can see again, clearer air mass does move through, showing slightly cooler air. You can see that on the upper air temperatures. Colder air sinking southwards, but again, not expecting anything ridiculously cold for the time of year. But again, just a coolish air mass that will give colder conditions for Scotland and bring us back down towards average further southwards. So you can see over the next 5 days, nothing exceptional really going on. Staying unsettled in the north, drier in the south, but increasing cloud later this week as those weather fronts and more unstable air does take more of an influence. But again, still coming up against that higher pressure, so it is fizzling any of that precipitation out and just leaving sort of dull, cloudy picture. If you look at those wind gusts tonight, you can see over the course of this evening 50, 60, maybe even the isolated 70 mile per hour wind gusts. But again, as we run through, not expecting anything too crazy. The strongest wind gusts there under the sort of the black bar at the top are maybe 70, 80 miles per hour off the coast of northern Scotland. So it could be quite rough out at sea and towards coastal areas. But again, nothing completely out of the ordinary and generally just very gusty out there this evening. If we finish on the UKV and have a look at those 2 metre temperatures, you can see today big temperature contrast, low single digits further northwards, 10, 11 or 12 degrees further southwards. I actually do think it is slightly milder further southwards than this is showing. I think many areas have got towards that sort of 10 degree range. So yeah, quite pleasant out there in the sunshine, but again, it is all dependent on the air mass. You see these same conditions with an air mass 5 or 10 degrees colder, it will feel really quite chilly in there. We are getting towards the time of year now where we can sort of get false springs, where we see a couple days of sunshine, a slightly warmer air mass, and we feel pretty nice and pleasant out there. Don't need a coat, things like that. But we can very quickly get plunged back into wintry conditions, and that what could be happening into next week, as we'll see in a minute. But if we run through the rest of this week, you can see overnight tonight temperatures widely dropping down to the mid to maybe low single digits. Nothing too cold, but nothing particularly mild. And then tomorrow, quite a dull day, as I said, with the cloud, maybe 8 to 10 degrees quite widely, cooler further northwards. As we head into Thursday, overnight temperatures once again mid to maybe even high single digits with that air trapped under the cloud. And Thursday afternoon, look at that, 10 to 12 degrees quite widely, even into Scotland, mid to high single digits. So quite a mild day there for the 2nd of February. And then into Friday afternoon, again, 10 to 12 degrees, very mild to end Friday, and then into Saturday. Still mild further southwards, but cooler areas drifting in, and you can see a widespread frost appearing further northwards. So it does look likely the start of the weekend will be quite mild, but then into Sunday it will turn cooler, probably just sending us back towards average for the time of year. But this is nothing compared to what could be happening in around a week's time if we are to believe the latest switch in the models. Again, though, I must emphasise they were going very westerly yesterday and the day before. Even the Ensemble members still showed some easterly scenarios, but the majority were sort of neutral, with westerly patterns more prevailing. So it has definitely been a big switch up, and we have to remember it could switch up once again. So we can't take this as gospel, but it definitely has consolidated more today on more of a Scandinavian high, colder pattern out of kind of nowhere. But it is what we're seeing, so we're going to have to have a look at that. So you can see over the course of the next few days, high pressure eventually builds over the top of us, and this is where we pretty much got to early next week. But what we saw yesterday and the day before was that high pressure either holding on and just sitting over the top of us, or toppling with these westerly winds prevailing. But that's not what the models do today. That high pressure extends towards Scandinavia, and yes, westerly winds tried to push in, but we actually pull in an easterly wind around that day 10 point. Quite cold air is moving in. This latest GFS doesn't fully get in any sort of proper cold, but it does get in chilly air mass in, frost, fog, and colder than average conditions. But we'll have a look at the midnight run, which was very, very cold, I must say. So you can see very cold air is a couple hundred miles to our east. The -10 ice firm is just there. The -5 ice firm gets in. So it does go cold, for eventually we do see bitterly cold air spread through from most of Europe. Just avoid the British Isles though. So we're unlucky there to miss out on the cold air, but it is a very similar pattern. However, if I do run to the midnight run and have a look what that show. Again, it's very similar evolution, high pressure up towards Scandinavia, but the flood doors open to bitterly cold Siberian air. Pretty much the whole British Isles there under the -10 ice firm, some areas getting even colder than that. So that would produce widespread ice days, a lot of heavy snow showers pushing in from the east, and it would generally be bitterly cold and see repeated bouts of those easterly winds. And right into the long term, that high pressure retrogresses up towards Greenland, and we could be plunging into a northerly there. And with little low pressure systems running into that cold air, could be seeing major snow with this as well through the first half of February. And again, we run it back, have a look at the temperature deviation. Again, bitterly cold air flooding in from the east, just sat over the top of us. And again, look at the potential equivalent temperature, just showing you where that air mass is coming from, all the way from Siberia. Bitterly cold air flooding in and giving us a very cold pattern. Not quite as cold as the beast from the east, which got down to sort of -15 to -20 degrees at 850 HPA, but it's a similar sort of pattern, and would have the same sorts of outcomes. Again, we can't pinpoint everything, but it would be similar in terms of being bitterly cold, very cold wind chill, and temperatures hardly getting above freezing in the day, and it have a lot of wintry showers in the east as well. Very cold pattern from the GFS today. Huge contrasts to the runs we were seeing earlier yesterday. If we look at the GEM, see how that does compare. Again, higher pressure building in. And as I said, we get to the point early next week where most of the models yesterday had either the high pressure just sat over the top of us, or the westerly winds flying over the top. But today, it gets towards Scandinavia, and we are poised to pull in an easterly wind. Look at that bitterly cold air, just a couple hundred miles away. And again, that would be pulling in very cold air in the near future. Again, it could be halted by a westerly flow, but it's a very similar pattern to the GFS, and you can see that 10 to 12 degrees below average air just sitting out towards Eastern Europe, ready to spread towards northwestern Europe. So again, doesn't directly develop bitterly cold air, but it's that pattern that will develop cold air towards the middle of February, and this would produce again something very similar to that GFS run. If we have a look at the ECMWF and compare that, we're able to see it's very similar. And again, that's the biggest thing about this. It's not just one model that's now suddenly gone for Easterlies. All three main models for the midnight run have gone for Easterlies, and you can see the high pressure up towards Scandinavia, and yes, it's not pulling anything bitterly cold in, but the high pressure is towards Scandinavia and towards Denmark, and we are pulling an easterly flow in. Bitterly cold air spreading towards southeast Europe, and we'll be pulling that cold air in towards the UK. It wouldn't be a particularly snowy pattern, simply because we're more under the centre of the high, so there would be less instability and less showers, and those isobars more spread out, but it would equally be very cold towards the surface. Again, we go to the United Kingdom look, and look at the 2 metre temperatures, it is very cold. Again, I don't want to look at the specifics too much at this stage, because things will be changing still, but even with a pattern like that, where we only just about get the -5 line in, it is very cold, and that's something we'll have to remember to look at on the ensembles in a minute, because even some of the runs that don't show bitterly cold upper air temperatures, if they show a cool continental flow, it still can be very cold at the surface, as we saw last week when we saw a temperature inversion with the upper air temperatures around freezing at area 50 HPA, but many areas hardly got above freezing in the day last week. And that could be a similar pattern here with that slack easterly flow, because as you can see, we don't get all that cold air in. But again, coming from the east towards the surface, it would be very cold. Now, after you finish by looking at the ensembles, these are the latest 6 o'clock run, and you can see generally the next week or so we're average to above or slightly below at times. However, as we hit also the 6th to 8th of February point, around a week's time, we have about a 50-50 split. Around 50% of the ensemble members go down towards that -5 region, and some go lower than that. We can see maybe 5 to 10 get down towards the -8 to -12, or even lower, similar to the GFS operation run for the midnight run. GFS operational here does cut it off a little bit. As we saw, it doesn't produce a full-blown easterly, but a very similar pattern. And we are generally below average, low precipitation, again indicative of a high pressure build. Longer term, we still have a lot of spread, some bitterly cold, some more around average, and we won't really be able to comment on that all too much, because it again depends on how the high pressure develops between the 6th and the 8th of February. Again, you look at the sea level pressure, higher pressure build, no signs of anything much lower than around 1,020 millibars in the next 10 days. And the all-important thing is to look at the dew points. Now again, this is a very good indication of where the air is originating from. And you can see from around the 6th to 8th of February, we drop well below freezing on the majority of ensemble runs for the dew points. Now, the dew points do reflect the origins of air and how dry the air is. Now, anything coming off the continent this time of year, as we saw from the ECMWF, might not be bitterly cold at the upper air temperatures, but at the surface, it will have a very cold dew point and pretty cold temperatures as well. And that's what we're seeing here from the ensemble, from the majority of ensemble members. So this would suggest that we do have some very cold easterly winds from, as I said, maybe 50% or less of the ensemble members, including the operational run at midnight and the operational run for a time here. But we also have quite a big cluster of runs that just build the high pressure in and pull in a cool easterly flow, but nothing bitterly cold, but it would still produce cool or potentially very cold weather at the surface. Probably not that wintry with a slack flow, but it would equally produce cooler weather. And that's why there is a big flip here, because this would suggest the majority of ensemble members go for some sort of cold spell towards that 6th to 12th of February point. As I said, only a few of them are going for a bitterly cold, snowy, beast from the east kind of pattern, but quite a few are also just going for a cool continental flow. And we'll have to see exactly how that does develop. But if you are looking for cold weather, this is very encouraging, because it means the majority of ensemble members have that high pressure build and have the wind coming in from the continent, i.e. from an easterly direction. But it depends on how that easterly wind does develop in the longer term to decide how cold and potentially how snowy it could get. If we do finish by looking at the ensemble members for the ECMWF, again, pretty similar around average over the course of the next week, and then around that 6th to 8th of February point, we dip just below average, but there is huge spread. Some are going very cold, some are actually going very mild, but there is a big cluster around that -4 to -6 point, and that will just be that cool continental flow, just where the operational ECMWF is. So I do think from these ensemble members, from the ECMWF here, there are still quite a few going for a very cold easterly wind, but the majority are more from just a cool continental flow. So yes, high pressure building up towards Scandinavia, but nothing bitterly cold, just generally below average, and it could be very cold depending on the exact air mass, exact wind direction, and things like that will only be able to clear up nearer the time. So again, we'll have to see what happens here, but definitely a big swing. We were expecting a Scandinavian high, but all hopes were kind of lost in the last few days, as we did see the model output very much veer away from it. You can check out the videos from the last few days. We were still potentially hinting at it, but the majority of runs had it maybe 1 out of 4 runs in a day, or starting to just push it away from with the westerly winds. But today they very much have rocketed back onto this easterly wind, this Scandinavian high sort of pattern. So we'll have to see what happens over the course of the next couple of weeks. So yeah, do remember to make sure you check out the videos, as this will be very interesting to watch it evolve. It could change, it could flip-flop, we could go back to westerlies tomorrow and then back to easterlies the day after. So make sure you do take this with a pinch of salt as you view the models, as it will be an ever-evolving situation. And again, could be very cold, it could not be very cold, it could just be a cool easterly. We will have to see, of course. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed. Do enjoy the relatively mundane weather over the course of the next week, as it could get very interesting towards the middle of the month. And I'll see you again for another video soon.